The turkey is dry. It tastes like ash in my mouth. The air in the dining room, usually thick with the scent of cloves and simmering cider, feels thin, brittle. I can hear the distant scrape of forks on plates, the forced laughter of extended family members trying to pretend everything is normal. But it isn't. Normal shattered about 30 seconds ago. My mother sits at the head of the table, her eyes, sharp and cold, fixed on mine. Relatives shift in their seats, suddenly fascinated by their cranberry sauce. My father stares at the ceiling, a familiar escape route. The words hang in the air, heavy and suffocating. She didn't yell. She didn't need to. She just said them, clear and calm, right after I'd mumbled something about maybe, potentially thinking about trying to start a small business someday. A tiny flicker of a dream I'd dared to voice in the safe space of Christmas dinner. You, she'd said, a short, sharp laugh escaping her lips. It wasn't a laugh of amusement. It was a dismissal, an execution. Amount to anything? Don't be ridiculous. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full of everything she meant, everything she'd always implied. You're not smart enough, not driven enough, not good enough. You're just you, and you will never amount to anything. The heat in my cheeks isn't from the mulled wine. It's a slow burn that starts deep in my gut and crawls up my throat, threatening to choke me. I grip my fork, my knuckles white. Around a table, eyes dart, then quickly look away. They heard it. They always hear it. And maybe some of them, they agree. Let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. And if you haven't already, please subscribe. It helps me more than you know. Growing up, I wasn't the golden child. My siblings excelled effortlessly. Straight A's, sports trophies, scholarships. I was the one who daydreamed in class, whose report cards always carried that faint undertone of disappointment, the one who preferred sketching in a corner to structured activities. My mother saw ambition as a checklist, a path laid out by others. My winding thoughts, my quiet creative sparks, they were just unproductive. Proof I lacked the right stuff. You need structure, she'd say, arranging my messy desk, her lips pursed. You need to apply yourself, as if myself was the problem. I got a job after college. It was safe, stable. It paid the bills. It was, in her eyes, something, but it felt like a cage. The walls were padded with routine, the bars painted in shades of beige. Every morning, I'd walk into that office, the smell of stale coffee and recycled air filling my lungs, and feel a part of me shrink. I sat in cubicle 3B, staring at spreadsheets, and the quiet hum of the computers was the soundtrack to a life I hadn't chosen. The business idea? It was a seed planted in the small hours, watered with stolen moments of passion. It was something I truly believed in, something that felt like me. I'd pore over market research late at night, sketching logos, writing business plans that felt clumsy and hopeful. It was my secret garden, a place where those suffocating words couldn't reach. Voicing it at Christmas was an act of desperate bravery, or maybe just foolishness. I wanted what? Her approval? Her belief? Stupid. I knew better. But sometimes, hope is a stubborn weed. Her words landed like a physical blow. They didn't just sting. They rearranged something inside me. The quiet hope that had been nurturing my little seed was instantly incinerated. In its place bloomed a cold, hard fury. It wasn't the first time she'd cut me down, but doing it in front of everyone on Christmas felt like a public declaration of my inadequacy. It wasn't just discouragement. It was a prophecy delivered with absolute certainty. The drive home that night was silent. My partner, bless them, didn't try to fix it. They just held my hand, their thumb tracing patterns on my skin. But their touch couldn't reach the frozen core inside me. Those words were on repeat. You'll never amount to anything. The next morning, I woke up before dawn. The air was sharp with the memory of frost. Something had shifted. The shame was still there, but it was now edged with something sharper. Resolve. Not just to prove her wrong, but to build something undeniable. Something that would scream success so loud, she wouldn't be able to pretend she didn't hear it. I quit the beige job 2 weeks later. Everyone thought I was insane. My father called, worried. My siblings sent cautious texts. My mother? She didn't call. She didn't need to. I could feel her silent, smug certainty across town. See? I told you. Impulsive. Unstable. He'll never amount to anything. The early days were brutal. Working from my cramped apartment, the line between work and life blurred into an exhausting mess. My initial attempts felt clumsy, amateurish. I tried reaching out to potential mentors, former colleagues. Most ignored my emails. Some responded with polite rejections, laced with pity. One, a guy I thought was a friend, practically laughed me off the phone. Building that? Good luck. You'll be back in a cubicle by summer. Money was tighter than I'd ever known. Every dollar spent on supplies or software felt like a gamble I couldn't afford to lose. I ate instant noodles, wore the same 5 shirts, and watched my savings dwindle like sand through fingers. The fear was a constant knot in my stomach. Was she right? Was this just a foolish dream fueled by pride and anger? I pitched to investors. Small ones, local ones. They'd listen politely, nod, and then say, "It's interesting, but..." The but was always some version of, "You're unproven, the market is tough. It's too risky." Mostly, I suspected it was, "You're not the kind of person we invest in." I didn't have the right pedigree, the right connections, the right look. I was just a person with an idea and dwindling funds. The rejections piled up like discarded paper snowballs. Each one was a fresh blow, a new voice whispering her words in my ear. "You'll never amount to anything." The silence from my mother was louder than any noise. It was the sound of someone waiting for me to fail, so she could collect on her prophecy. My partner worked extra shifts to help make ends meet. I saw the worry in their eyes, the strain in their smile. Their unwavering support was a lifeline, but it also added weight to the possibility of failure. I wasn't just failing myself anymore. Then came the first real glimmer of hope. A small local grant program. It wasn't much, but it was enough to build a proper prototype, to take the idea out of my head and make it tangible. I poured every ounce of energy into it. Days bled into nights. Sleep became a luxury I couldn't afford. My apartment became a workshop, wires and tools and prototypes scattered everywhere. The prototype worked. It was clunky, imperfect, but it worked. It proved the concept was viable. This was the first taste of real progress, a tiny counterargument to the chorus of doubt. I felt a surge of adrenaline, a belief that maybe, just maybe, I could do this. Armed with the working prototype and a slightly refined pitch, I went back into the world of fundraising. This time, I aimed a little higher. I met with a few venture capitalists, people who dealt in bigger numbers, bigger risks. One meeting stuck with me. It was with a firm known for backing innovative, slightly unconventional projects. The partner I met with, a woman named Anya, had a reputation for seeing potential others missed. The meeting went well. She seemed genuinely interested, asked sharp, insightful questions. She didn't dismiss me, didn't patronize me. "I like the idea," she said, leaning back in her chair. "I like your passion. It's raw. Unfiltered." She smiled faintly. "Most people we see are polished, rehearsed. You're not. That can be a strength." My heart hammered against my ribs. This felt different. This felt like a door opening. She said they'd be in touch. I left her office walking on air, trying not to let the fragile hope break. A few days later, she called. They were interested. Very interested. They wanted to invest. The amount was more than I'd dared to dream. It was enough to hire a small team, rent a real office space, not just a cubicle, but a place where we could build and create. It was enough to launch properly. I signed the papers in a daze. The ink felt sacred. This wasn't just money. It was validation. It was proof that Anya, a respected professional, saw something in me, something my mother insisted didn't exist. The relief was immense, but it was quickly followed by a new kind of pressure. Now I had backing expectations. Failure wasn't just personal anymore. It would impact others. My mother? She heard about the funding, inevitably. Small towns, or rather, extended families, are rumor mills. the news reached her. Her reaction wasn't congratulations. It was suspicion. Where did you get that kind of money? Are you sure you know what you're doing? These things collapse, still the doubt, just wearing a different hat. She couldn't dismiss the funding, so she tried to poison its source, its future. We moved into a small, slightly dingy office space. It smelled faintly of old coffee and possibility. Hiring was tough. Finding people who believed in the vision as much as I did, who were willing to take a chance on a startup led by someone everyone else seemed to doubt, was a challenge. But we found them. A small, scrappy team united by belief and a shared willingness to work around the clock.
The real work began.
Turning the prototype into a polished, marketable product. It was harder than I'd anticipated. Technical hurdles we hadn't foreseen emerged. Supply chain issues cropped up. The initial timeline stretched. The budget, generous as it was, started to feel tight. Anya remained supportive, but her questions became sharper. Are we on track? What are the contingencies? I felt the weight of her investment, her belief, pressing down on me. This is where things started to get complicated. One of the people I hired early on was a distant cousin, Mark. He was smooth-talking, seemed eager, and claimed to have experience in the industry. Family had recommended him, saying he was looking for a fresh start. I wanted to build something that felt like a community, maybe even heal some of the family rifts, so I gave him a chance. Mark was charismatic, good at meetings, great at appearing busy. He quickly became a key part of the small team, handling some of the external communications and early partnership discussions. I trusted him. He was family after all. He'd listen to my frustrations, offer advice, seem genuinely invested. He'd talk about how exciting it was to be part of this, how he finally felt like he was doing something meaningful. What I didn't know, couldn't have imagined, was that Mark was relaying information. Not just casual updates, but details. Our challenges, our setbacks, our cash flow situation. He wasn't doing it for some grand, malicious purpose, not initially. He was doing it because my mother, his aunt, was asking. And she wasn't just asking, she was subtly, persistently encouraging him to keep her informed. She framed it as concern for my risky venture, but the real motive was clear. She wanted to be the first to know when it all came crashing down. She wanted to collect her "I told you so" promptly. Mark, being easily swayed and perhaps seeing an opportunity to stay in his aunt's good graces, maybe she offered him something, a favor, financial help later, who knows, started passing along snippets. Then, as the pressure mounted and our challenges grew, he started sharing more significant details. He'd frame it to her as trying to help him manage expectations, or making sure she wasn't surprised if it failed. Unaware of the leak, I battled the rising tide of problems. A crucial component failed testing, forcing us back to the drawing board and costing precious time and money. A major potential client we'd been courting for months suddenly went cold, stopped returning calls. Every setback felt amplified, the pressure intensifying. My mother's calls, which had been rare, became more frequent. She still didn't offer encouragement. Instead, her questions were laced with pointed concern. "Heard things are difficult," she'd say, her tone falsely sweet. "Are you sure this wasn't too much for you?" I started to feel like I was fighting on two fronts, the external battle of building a business and an internal, insidious one against unseen forces. How did she know about that specific issue with the component? Why did she ask about that potential client? It felt like she had spies. The cash was running critically low. We needed another round of funding fast. But the setbacks had hurt our projections. Anya was still supportive, but cautious. The initial buzz had worn off, replaced by the grim reality of execution challenges. Getting the next investment was proving much harder than the first. We were facing layoffs. I hadn't slept properly in weeks. My partner was worried sick. The fear was back, a cold, clammy presence that never left. Was this it? Was she finally going to be right? The thought was like swallowing glass. One late night, sifting through project files, I stumbled upon something odd on our shared drive. A log of external communications Mark was handling. Most of it was innocuous. But then I saw a pattern. A series of emails forwarded, ostensibly for archiving, but addressed to a personal email I didn't recognize. Curiosity overriding exhaustion, I dug deeper. The personal email belonged to someone associated with a company that competed tangentially with ours, a company known for aggressive tactics, and more importantly, a company my mother had some minor past connections to through family friends. It clicked. My blood ran cold. It wasn't just gossip she was getting. Mark wasn't just feeding her information, he was funneling competitive data, our vulnerabilities, to someone who could potentially use it against us. And my mother was the conduit, or perhaps even orchestrating it, using Mark as her pawn. The friend who'd practically laughed at me off the phone early on? He worked for that competitor. The client who went cold? They had recently signed a deal with that competitor. It wasn't just my mother waiting for me to fail. She was actively, subtly, working to make me fail. And she was using family to do it. The betrayal cut deeper than any of her dismissive words ever had. It wasn't just a lack of belief, it was sabotage. The initial shock gave way to a wave of pure, unadulterated rage. How dare they? How dare she? Use my own cousin, someone I'd trusted, to undermine me? To try and dismantle something I'd poured my entire being into? For a moment, I wanted to confront Mark, to scream at him, to fire him on the spot. I wanted to call my mother and unleash every buried resentment, every hurt, every angry word I'd ever held back. But then, the cold resolve I'd found after that Christmas dinner returned, sharper now, honed by betrayal. This wasn't about anger anymore. It was about survival. It was about winning. Not just succeeding, but succeeding in a way that would render their actions utterly meaningless. I didn't confront Mark. I didn't let on that I knew. Instead, I started feeding him information. Misinformation. Subtle inaccuracies about our progress, exaggerated problems, false leads on our next strategic moves. I used his betrayal against him, turning him into an unwitting double agent, unknowingly feeding poison back to the source. I also changed our strategy. The competitor thought they knew our weaknesses, our plan. We pivoted. We accelerated timelines they thought were impossible. We quietly secured a small bridge loan they didn't know we were even seeking. We built a contingency plan for every piece of information Mark had likely leaked. The pressure was immense. Pretending everything was normal while orchestrating a counter-strategy, watching Mark play his role, knowing my mother was on the other end, waiting for news of my collapse. It felt like walking a tightrope over an abyss. The plan coalesced around our product launch. It had to be big. It had to be undeniable. Not just a press release, not just an industry event. It had to be public. It had to be seen. We pushed the team harder than ever. They were exhausted, but there was a fire in their eyes. They believed. They didn't know about the sabotage, but they felt the weight of the struggle, the need to prove everyone wrong. We secured a spot on a national morning news show known for featuring innovative new companies. It was a long shot, involved countless calls, emails, pitches. But we landed it. 10 minutes. 10 minutes to introduce our product to millions. I didn't tell my family. I didn't tell Mark. I kept it quiet, shared only with the core team who needed to prepare. This was the moment. The culmination of everything. The struggle, the betrayal, the relentless fight. The day of the broadcast dawned gray and cold. My stomach was a knot of nerves and adrenaline. I was running on fumes and pure, icy determination. We arrived at the studio before sunrise. The lights were blinding. The set felt surreal. Microphones were clipped on, cameras tested. My partner was there, a quiet, steady presence. "You got this," they whispered, squeezing my hand. Mark was there too, part of the small group from the company present for support. He looked nervous, excited, oblivious. The competitor knew we were launching something, but based on the information Mark had fed them, they expected a small, limited release, maybe a regional announcement. They certainly didn't expect this. My mother, I knew, would be watching. She watched that morning show. She liked its blend of news and lifestyle. She'd be in her living room, coffee in hand, expecting what? To see me stumble? To hear me announce something small and insignificant? To reinforce her narrative. The host turned to me, smiling brightly. So, tell us about this revolutionary new technology. I took a deep breath. My voice was steady, calm. I introduced the product, explained its benefits, talked about the problem it solved. I talked about the vision behind it, the years of work, the challenges overcome. Then, the host asked about the company itself. You're a new face on the scene, she said. Tell us about the journey. This was it. The moment. I looked directly into the camera. I wasn't looking at the millions watching. I was looking at one person. It's been a challenging journey, I said, my voice low but clear. Building something new always is. There's a lot of doubt. A lot of people who tell you it can't be done. People who actively hope you'll fail. I paused, letting the words hang. On the set, I saw Mark shift uneasily. In fact, I continued, a faint, almost imperceptible smile touching my lips. I was once told, very clearly over Christmas dinner, that I would never amount to anything. The host's smile faltered slightly, sensing the shift in tone. This wasn't the usual upbeat startup story. Some people, I went on, my gaze still fixed on the lens, don't just withhold belief. They actively try to undermine you. They use people you trust, people close to you, to gather information, to try and hobble your progress. Mark's eyes widened, a look of dawning horror spreading across his face. He glanced instinctively towards his phone, then towards me. But what they don't understand, I said, my voice gaining strength, is that sometimes that opposition, that betrayal, that sheer certainty of your failure, that's the most powerful fuel there is. I gestured towards the product, which was now displayed on a large screen behind me. Because when you have nothing left to lose and everything to prove, you fight harder. You innovate faster. You build something not just to succeed, but to stand as an undeniable testament to their wrongness. I then announced not just the product launch, but a major partnership deal we had secretly secured, a deal that dwarfed anything our competitor had recently announced. I revealed our expansion plans, the jobs we were creating, the impact we expected to have. It wasn't just a launch, it was a declaration of arrival, a statement of undeniable success. On the screen behind me, our logo flashed, vibrant and strong. In the studio, the host beamed, back on script, clearly impressed. The crew was buzzing. And somewhere in a living room, I pictured the silence. The coffee cup frozen halfway to her lips. The absolute shock. The realization that not only had I succeeded, I had done so despite her, and because of the fire she'd ignited, a fire she'd tried to extinguish with the help of someone she trusted, someone she thought was reporting back to her. The irony was a cold, sweet taste in my mouth. The broadcast ended. The studio erupted in controlled chaos. Handshakes, congratulations, cameras flashing. People were talking about the product, the company, the story. I looked over at Mark. He was pale, trembling slightly. The smooth mask was gone, replaced by fear and shock. He knew I knew. He knew he'd been exposed, not just to me, but on national television, subtly but unmistakably called out. He hadn't just failed to sabotage me. He had been used to amplify my success. He had walked into a trap of his own making, led there by the very person who had orchestrated his betrayal. He stumbled forward, trying to speak. I didn't. Save it, Mark, I said, my voice quiet, devoid of anger now. Just finality. You made your choice. I didn't fire him there. I dealt with it later, quietly, professionally. The competitor was blindsided. Their plans to counter our small launch were useless against the scale we had just revealed. They scrambled to catch up, but the moment had passed. The phone calls and messages started flooding in. Congratulations from friends, from colleagues, even from some relatives who had been silent before. My father called, his voice thick with emotion. We're so proud, he kept saying. My mother didn't call. She never mentioned the broadcast. She never mentioned that Christmas dinner. The subject became a silent, awkward chasm between us. When we saw each other at family gatherings, the tension was palpable. Everyone else knew. They had seen it. They had heard the words spoken years ago, and they had seen the undeniable answer delivered on national TV. Her prophecy hadn't come true. But something else had. I had built something. Something real. Something that mattered. Success wasn't the magic bomb I thought it would be. It didn't erase the sting of the words, the hurt of the betrayal. The scar was still there. But now, it felt less like a wound and more like a reminder. A reminder of what happens when someone tells you you're not enough. You can either wither under the weight of their doubt, or you can use it as fuel to build something so bright, it blinds them. The greatest vindication wasn't proving them wrong. It was proving myself right. Right to believe in the quiet dream, right to walk away from the beige cage, right to fight like hell for the life I wanted. The silence from her is the loudest sound of all now. It speaks volumes about the narrative she can no longer control. And in that silence, I finally found my own voice, strong and clear, no longer needing permission or validation. I had amounted to something, more than she could have ever imagined. If this story hit close to home, I'd love to hear a version in the comments below. Drop a comment with where you're listening from and what time it is. Thanks for being here. Subscribing helps bring more of these to life.